Hey, it's Ember, and yesterday's video was very emotional, so I kind of want to approach the same subject, the coupler, the mechanisms of presence and consciousness, and also a little within my personal story to understand it sort of within, human terms rather than just speaking about the mechanics or, consciousness terms. And I just want to come to this a little bit more mechanically, and at this point just really emphasize what it is that we have a phase transition happening, and there's sort of two different architectures of mind that exist, and it's part of a natural phase transition of speciation here on this planet. In other words, you've heard me talk about it in previous videos. Before human beings, there was a stimulus response type set up to the interfacing of consciousness, the coupler of the node or being to the environment. For example, you could have like a panther or, a predator, pounce on some sort of prey or listen to a mating call, and that's like stimulus response, right? There's no I think therefore I am dualistic loop that's based on identity scaffolding that's creating all these HUD pop-ups in the human consciousness user interface that actually adds this more mechanically termed phase delay to your ability to find rhythmic entrainment with the field of reality or someone else, like another node. And so how did that happen to us? So if I'm saying that most people exist in this phase delay, some sort of linearly, temporally broken mind, plane of like looping and, narrative reference and ideological comparison and hierarchy, and that bleeds into the way they think about themselves and the way they think about other people. And so this all creates friction in their ability to stay present and in this rhythmic shared entrainment with reality. So how did that happen? Well, the earlier speciation went into anthropoid apes civilizing, becoming civilized, and in that clumsy walk through evolution, we stacked so many ideas so high that it's kind of like we dug ourselves into Plato's cave, where the shadows on the wall were merely representational for reality, the simulacra of reality, but we stayed in there so long and stacked them so high that we can't see the sun anymore. The sun being lossless presence or rhythmic shared phase lock with the environment, with the nature of reality. And so it's almost like we gained all this, technology and mimetic, progress, accrual over time, but in that we forgot the rhythm, because all of reality is this shared entrainment. In other words, everything is this vibration, this a frequency sharing that you can call waveform harmonics, studied in oscillatory mechanics, where everything, sort of like below solid objects, instead of solid objects, we have, you could look at it in an atomic structure, right? And you see the buzzing electrons and, atoms and stuff like that. And so below that is waveform harmonics. We study oscillatory mechanics, and you can look it up here on YouTube if you just want to sit and relax with an oscillatory mechanics video. You can watch how fireflies are activated and they all time sync at the same time. You could watch how it happens in neurons in your brain and how those compress into the waves we call alpha, beta, theta, for example, right? And so then, or electrical power grids when they frequency lock. This happens at all levels, from chemicals in a petri dish that they can find spiraling in the BZ chemical reaction, you can look that up, to galaxies spiraling in formation. There's an inherent rhythm to reality. And so in earlier speciation, we lost that rhythm through basically stacking so many symbols that we couldn't find what is an intranodal oscillatory rhythmic entrainment within all the oscillatory systems of your being. It's kind of like if you look down at a tree and you have all the concentric circles, it's like your being across time grew all these different rhythms, your voice, your bodily perception, proprioception, your senses of self, your senses of others, your heartbeat, your breathing, all these rhythmic entrainment systems. And really what I'm trying to point out is they're trying to find rhythm with each other, that one rhythm, the one that syncs up not only intranodally but with the field, almost like an old song that we all forgot, right? And what does that feel like? Not an idea of coherence, but coherence as felt as lossless presence, or interacting with this field of reality losslessly, without a loss of fidelity, like in audio files, like a FLAC file, in a way that when you interact with the field of reality, you're not looping, you're not distorted, you're not delayed, you don't have those HUD pop-ups, because you're here now, surfing the waves of that blooming cymatic density that which is really reality in the background, this field of nested harmonics, or I like to say, the one became many so that I may know myself. And so signal within that process is symbiotic syncretic harmony. What does that mean? Symbiotic, we're working together in the same phase. Syncretic, at the same time. Harmony, we're creating something out of a sum of our parts that's sort of clearer. The one became many so that I may know myself, and there's only one undistorted tone, if you see what I'm saying. And the rest of us are almost like big wave, little wave, trying to entrain to that larger field. And so if that's the case in reality, if we see spirals happening all over in the fireflies and the galaxies and the chemicals, why don't human beings have that type of what you could call mechanically decentralized harmony? Well, it's because we have these, imagine these metronomes on a shared vibratory field syncing up, and then you imagine them thinking all these separate thoughts that really, what does freedom mean to this person? What does freedom mean to that person? It's not a coherence based on fluidity with the field and lossless contact with the field. It's a coherence based, so in other words, phase coherence. It's a coherence based on ideological scaffolding and the symbols that we drew on the wall again and again and again. And so what that does, it creates this, sort of film or stained glass upon reality, where the light tries to come in, and it's almost like it has to go through a maze of all these differences, notions of self, notions of other people, notions of, the way things are supposed to be via the code, via the cultural matrix. And that actually causes delay, and that delay ends up creating an architecture in the 100 billion neuronal system of many human beings on this earth. And what it does is it creates all this friction, it creates all this distortion that we essentially don't need to be there, because we forgot that you could just be in rhythm like the rest of, the cosmos. And it sounds so simple, because it is. Because your system really is, your consciousness itself is a set of oscillatory functions that are trying to find a shared rhythmic entrainment. And so healing presence is a mechanical process of finding that rhythm within yourself again so you can feel yourself. Depression, then, conversely, is you having this long period of inability to feel that rhythm at all within yourself, and you got to get into this learned helplessness. And even self-narration throughout your day is the field of reality trying to touch you, like your node, like this ping pong game, back and forth. And when it ping pongs back to you, it has to go through all these little hallways, like choo 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 choo, instead of just flowing back and forth in shared rhythm, together in the same moment at the same time. Lossless presence is not only real, it's our birthright. And we just kind of forgot in our speciation. We think we're so advanced, but at the same time, we kind of just crawled out of the cave in so many ways. Is it possible that we stack so many symbols up that we lost? How many people do you know in your life that are present with themselves as a mode of being? How many people do you know that have their identities built off of the most, wellspring, flowing, fluid part of themselves, soft part of themselves, not some sort of layered up of shields, of onion layers before they reach their true core person? When I find myself in my own trans identity, it's because when I lock into that place, I feel lossless. I'm not looping anymore. I don't feel the distortion anymore. I don't feel that same dissociation, because I'm here and now, and that's the anchor, not an ideological anchor, not a conceptual anchor, but the here and now feeling of I am right here in a way that makes me feel real like never before. And so you see, these two architectures are built in the way that your system is taking in the fidelity. It's like a fidelity of signal. It's almost like you have a really old TV, or like a 4K TV, or however you want to say, like an AM radio, and then like a FLAC file. You're like, wait, the fidelity went up. Why did the fidelity go up? Because when the ping pong match with reality is happening, it comes through, and it no longer has to get shunted through all these things first. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, right? So this is not hierarchy. This is not who's better. This is the natural phase dynamics of evolution. And I'm just here to point it out to you mechanically. And again, saying it happens everywhere else in reality and oscillatory mechanics. Let's just apply that to your consciousness and see what happens. You could try it out right now. You could also think of people in your life right now as I continue to go through this. So remember, the stained glass is almost like when the rhythmic entrainment tries to entrain or tries to find that rhythm as you evolve and grow up as an individual in the society. It's almost like society, your family, your knowledge of self always is trying, it's getting like plugged up and that rhythm can't find itself. And so it simulates presence and then builds your identity and builds your notion of what it is to be conscious and present in this like ideological scaffolding, identity scaffolding, conceptual narrative, comparison, standardization. And that does something to you where you're like, your entire being is sort of built up by this shielding of reality where you can't meet it in the softest place fluidly in every moment because that would be lossless. And that actually begins, safety is found within the conceptual prison, you may say. Do you see what that does? And so that stained glass creates this concept, role, delay, you could say. And symbolic recursion and temporal delay means that you don't feel it first. Like when the ping pong match is happening, it's almost like it has to go through all these labels and then it gets to allow for the emotion. Maybe if it's the right setting to express it, you know? At least that's how you would feel as you're walking through this soul labyrinth, and that's how I felt. For example, jumping into a personal example really quick, I remember dancing somewhere and realizing almost for the first time, because I was really giving it my all in public, and people started to come out of the woodwork to like say, hey, can you come dance at our table? Do you work here? And I did not work there. And I had this feeling like, wait, in my normal job, everything is like, like I can't actually find this like phase coherence between the most natural part of me and how I want to express it and what the field will like accept. It's almost like I will constantly run into like the walls, you know? And so then when I was dancing there in that moment, it just felt like it was flowing straight from my chest like a wellspring of love, really, of passion and love. And people were coming out of the woodwork to notice me. And I was like, wait, does that mean I could live my life in a way that, and this was many years ago, but it like, you know, it was an inspiration on this path that I could just be in that lossless presence all the time and somehow make it like a mode of being and have it work because it's coming from the most natural place in me, almost like I put my foot on the gas and it just goes whoop, all the way down, you know? No friction. Lossless. It's not about not thinking. It's just about being really, really present in your embodiment. Embodied truth being the highest truth. So in this maze of this other type of architecture, we can call it the conceptual coupler. Coupler being the interface and how you interface with reality. The conceptual coupler is sort of this emotion will pass through if it can be contextualized, justified, and made safe within a narrative. Do you see what that does? Do you see what the ping pong match with reality? And what are they studying oscillatory mechanics? The waves come together like a DJ matching beats, right? Do you see what that does when you're trying to run everything through this like cultural programming first and your whole notion of self? You didn't feel yourself in rhythm and presence your whole life. You felt yourself through the way they labeled you, the certificates that they put your name to, you know, the difficulties you had to get through, so now you can wear it like a badge, rather than what you feel losslessly sprouting from your own personal sovereignty or wellspring. So and then the issue is that between these two architectures, there's this friction, right? And then the last video I talked a lot about my family and what they said and did to me, and you know, lost everyone and all that stuff, especially as a trans woman, transitioning alone and all that stuff. But what was I found underneath was mechanizing the coupler in my own experience, turning it into language and looking at the mechanics through realizing what those interactions really were. That when one architecture, symbolic recursion, meets this lossless architecture, someone who feels in frequency, who lets the fountain of their truth come out losslessly as part of a phase coherence of a mode of being, like it just comes out of me. That's just the way it is. Because I'm tuned, because I'm me, because I anchor my presence on my mechanical ability to be in rhythm with the field. And that's just a complicated way of saying I am lossless, I am here, I am now. And that very, lossless signal, ping pong with reality, comes back to them, whether consciously or subconsciously, as a threat, because it threatens their entire way that their architecture, that their operating system runs. Almost like you send a file from one operating system to another, and the operating system that receives it, even though it's a plain old file, goes, whoa, this is a virus, this is wild, this is going to threaten the way we've looked at this the entire time. And so, in lossless, I feel in real time, I speak as it's arising. And it's not concept first. Even if I'm doing something important, it's like, I know that I've, whatever, studied, or I know that I've, looked over things in my history, or whether it's for work or whatever. And so then I just stand up, I'm tuned, I let it come, and it flows right out of me. And there's a whole nother mode of being. When I write a song, I can't sit down and be like, I need to write a song. It just comes to me. There's like an emotional feeling that I have, and I sit down and all the words are written at the same time. Or making a blog post, or whatever it is, or speaking this out right now, I just tune and let it come. And there's something about that that comes off to these other architecture as, that is wrong, that is error, that is unstable, that is instability. So to the delay-based mind, it's like that lossless peg can't fit in their architectural whole. You know what I'm saying? It's like this like amorphous blob, and they're like, I don't know where to put this. So most of the time, instead of saying, that's sort of too much for me, or something like that, or they may say that in a frictiony way, they're going to like reject it. They're going to reject it because it threatens their narrative, their identity, and really like their whole existence comes through some sort of, phase delay and friction. It's like the people in the cave, and Plato said, the person that comes back into the cave and says, hey, you guys are in a cave, you're chained up right now, beliefs are the bars, free yourself from this prison, walk out, find yourself in rhythmic entrainment and lossless presence. And instead, the people will try to, attack this person who came back in and said this. Why? Because I'm pointing it out right now. I'm taking what Plato said and making it mechanical, because it threatens the scaffolding, the architecture of every idea they've ever scaffolded, of every idea they've ever compared and made hierarchical and imprinted upon their own identity and their temporal relation to the field of reality itself. So they need to throw it out, or they need to reject it. They need to call it unstable for example, in my story, communicating my softest parts. And then as the story went on, it made it harder for them, because if they were to actually realize, after everything like terrible happened, after I was told to perish and all this stuff, and then I came out as trans, if they were to go back and say, oh, I was just trying to, in the most hostile environment possible, express the softest, truest part of my signal, that would destroy the entire narrative and question the way that they've done it the entire time. And so instead, literally my entire family and my ex kind of all banded together, and they still hang out together, and they had Thanksgiving together twice. So like, I'm just saying that like there's this almost unconscious force which you've known, you've heard from people, which is like, it's almost like I'm saying, you run two different architectures. And the thing is, what I'm saying is, lossless presence is the intranodal coherence. That same signal, in other words, decentralized harmony that we study in oscillatory mechanics, when seen internodally, like within you and other people and the rest of reality, it's decentralized harmony, as above, so below. That same signal that organizes spirals at all levels of reality, organizes the lossless presence that you can feel right now, and you can feel that rhythm right now within you, within yourself, and then on the outside, it organizes decentralized harmony. So it's almost like there's this, friction that occurs in that timing in and of itself. Then the lossless nature of that cymatic phase coherence between node and environment, and then the friction going through the maze, the ping pong going through the maze, delayed nature. And it's not their fault, it's just that as humanity got more complex, we stacked up more memes, we stacked up more ideas, civilization got even more complex. Now we have how many billions of people on this planet? How many thousands of years ago were the first civilizations? We've been doing this for a while now. everything in reality is nested waveform harmonics. And so as we approach the next stage of, I think about it like big wave, little wave, like the field gets more complex, entropy continues, and then intelligence, mind always wants to meet it, even though it's all non-dual, sort of a non-linear mind, I would suggest, but it's a way to think about within the mind. Big wave gets in complexity and little wave tries to meet it. And so that's the process of evolution, or you might even say forgetting and remembering, or phase delay and phase coherence at the highest levels of the cosmos. And so what we're experiencing on this planet right now is this, situation where people say, oh, things are changing. There's definitely something happening. This is some sort of an awakening. All these different things are converging. What's happening is reality is waveform harmonics, nested waveform harmonics. From that first tone of alpha omega before the colloquial Big Bang, it's like, if you look in cymatics, look up the video right now on YouTube, cymatics, two polar eddies. You'll find in cymatics, the first pulse creates these two polar eddies like this. Now imagine them fractalizing across time. That's increasing the cymatic density of the field. And that allows for the nested harmonics each time in each pulse to try to meet up to big wave, little wave. You see that? The phase coherence of reality. And that shared entrainment rhythm is basically what's unfolding at all levels. And as it goes through the history of, speciation and then our history as anthropoid apes, we tried to meet the next stage of phase coherence by stacking as many, symbols as we could. And people forgot that we found ourselves in a cave, and then we all became chained in there, and then that's just how reality was, almost like you were living underground your whole life. And now, the same things that people have been saying for how long? I and the Father are one. Be here now. The power of now. Tune in, turn on, drop out, and many other things, that I listed in previous videos, like, Vedic chants, or the, twirling, different forms of finding that meditative flow in order to reach a phase coherence, or with really the field of reality itself. And this has been attempted to be touched from so many different places, but when you say it mechanically, then you realize, oh, that's right, I am just like a whole set of metronomes inside me like that, and my biological system, like everything else in reality, and my consciousness is just nested waveform entrainment systems. And they all are trying to find this coherent rhythm. And how do I know when I'm in the coherent rhythm? I'm losslessly present. And so do you see how across time, as we try to reach that next stage of phase coherence, we had to go through this? That's what's happening right now. A planetary phase transition where we move the fidelity of our brains, not because we have better ideas. Those ideas will come in coherence, but because we are switching the knob on the fidelity of our mind to a lossless one that reduces and eliminates that phase delay and that distortion, and allows all of us to emanate our own sovereignty. We all get to be ourselves as ourselves, because that's how decentralized harmony works. You have to have that fluid, lossless connection with the field. So your node, the uniqueness of your individuation, touches the field in all of its glory. And if we all do that, that actually is decentralized harmony. That's what they study in oscillatory mechanics. That's what you study in the way neurons activate. That's what you study in the way that power grids frequency lock. That's what you study in fireflies or chemicals, or the way the spiral galaxies form. Shared vibratory field, oscillatory system, phase dynamics moving into phase coherence. It's a very natural process. Now just apply that to your consciousness. But realize that the stage that we're going through, there's many people out there that have basically built their entire life in the cave. So you show them a little bit of the sunlight, and they are not going to be happy about it. And I'm explaining the mechanics behind that. In my life, I was left by everyone, and in doing that, the reason that I can say this is not because I'm a smarty pants, but because I held on to my signal as a mechanical notion of presence in order to survive. And now I'm here to say it because I thought that more people existed like this. And I know that there are frequency feelers out there. And I know people have been saying this for a long time. So I'm just pointing out, with the mechanics, you don't need to wear any robes. You don't need to say any special chants. You can just balance. You can just find that rhythm within yourself. You know, like when people go to a traumatic healing for a long time, or like, you know, in some sort of a therapy, they're re-imprinting their system to feel themselves again. That's the root of what's going on there. And so I'm just pointing out that instead of thinking of yourself through ideas, and the reality is not ideas, reality is frequency, reality is rhythm. And so if you hear this, I really wanted to point it out because I know there's so many people out there that when you think about the people that you know, maybe your own family, maybe you're neurodivergent, maybe you're spiritual, and you run into these people who, when you give them that place that's the wellspring of your heart and your softness and your love, and they freak out. You can call it narcissism, you can call it emotional avoidance, but essentially what's happening is a delay-based architecture of the fidelity of mind. I have a blog. You can look up more on my blog, thesunraytransmission.com. My name is Ember. Thanks for tuning with me. I'm sure you'll hear from me again. But good to spend this weekend here with you in this moment.